This tutorial is going to be covering Littoral Commander Indo-Pacific, a grand tactical educational wargame created by Sebastian Bay, a Marine veteran. So the scenario that we're going to be playing out is a simplified version of Luzon Pass, and this is northern Luzon, the northern part of the Philippines, the South China Sea, the Philippine Sea, and this would be the connecting Luzon Strait that connects to Taiwan. In this overhead view, we're looking at the terrain, with the red being impassable terrain, the orange, yellow, and brown being steep terrain but can still be traversed, and then the green being easily passable terrain. Typically, the way that you'll see the game is that the troops and equipment are separated into different task forces. So what you're seeing here is 2 different American task forces on the closest side, and then 2 Chinese task forces on the opposing side. Each task force is separated by its capabilities typically. This is a naval task force with 3 different ships. The second task force for the United States would be a ground task force. It has 4 different units. On the opposing side, there is a Chinese naval task force and a Chinese ground task force. Each unit is represented by a cardboard piece, which will be placed on the board during the deployment phase, as well as a card which will allow players to track their equipment and their health. Focusing in on one of these cards, you'll see a variety of different information listed on the card. This square correlates directly to the cardboard piece that is on the board, and it has the same information. At the top left, you will see the unit type, whether it is a standard unit designator or if it's a ship, it'll display the type of ship. You'll see the unit designator as far as what it is called, directly below it. You will see its movement points denoted by a gray hex. The number inside of that hex is how many hexes that piece can move every turn. You do not have to roll dice to move. Movement is allowed no matter what. Down here in the colored boxes, you will see the combat values, as well as the range and hexes in which you can apply that combat value. So the larger number, the 10 for example, inside of this square, would denote that you'd have to roll a 10 or less in order for that attack to be successful with the long-range fires. The supernumerary, the smaller number, the 5, denotes that the range in which you can apply those long-range fires is up to 5 hexes from where this unit is stationed at. The same principles apply regardless of the color of the shape. So for interception, you would have to roll a 12 or less on a die in order to be successful, and the range in which you can defend out to is 2 hexes away based on that supernumerary. We will give an example of what an attack and a defense looks like in just a little bit. Dependent upon the color of the box will allow you to understand what it is that that equipment can do. If it is red, it is a long-range strike capability, so think ballistic missiles or rockets of some sort. If it is purple, that is a defense capability, it's an interception capability. So if there is a long-range strike coming in, the purple ammunition would allow you to have some kind of defense against that long-range strike. Looking down at the card, you can actually see the quantity that you have for that. So for the interception, there's a quantity of 6 that starts out. For the long-range fires, there is a quantity of 3. And then these black squares denote the hit points or the health points for that unit. So anytime it takes a hit, it would move down 1. If it is hit twice, that piece is now off the map. That unit is dead. Each of these cubes will move anytime that you expend equipment. So if you expend long-range fires and you denote that you want to fire 1, for example, it'll move over, and this card allows you to keep track of the quantity that you have. So this is an example of an infantry unit, and as you can see, there is no long-range strike capability. there's only small arms capability, which is shown with this green cube. This basically signifies that it is small arms capabilities. So when you look at the large number, remember that 5 means that you have to roll a 5 or less on the dice to be successful. And then the smaller number, the supernumerary, is a 0, which means that you have to be inside of the same hex as what you're attacking. There is no long-range strike capability with a unit like this. So the last type of unit that we'll look at is a logistics unit. And what you're seeing right here, the blue signifies that it's logistics. And you see a starting quantity of 7. And so basically, if I wanted to resupply another unit, let's say a HIMARS unit, for example, I could supply 2 units of equipment that's based on the big number up to 1 hex away that is based on the small number. And you do not have to roll dice in order to determine whether you'll be successful. As long as you're in range, you can use one of your moves to resupply another unit. So let's say that I did want to resupply a unit with 2 pieces of ammunition. I would simply be within range, and then I would move down the quantity of my unit by 2 and move up the quantity of the receiving unit by 2. So in addition to the normal unit trackers that you'll see out there on the board, you'll also see some things that look like this: military deception units. And these are paired with normal units to deceive the enemy and make them think that there's more units out there on the battlefield. What these also do is if an attack is successful against the adversary, then the first casualty that will actually go will be the mill deck. You will not take from the hit points until the mill decks are all expended. Additionally, there will be JCC cards in play in which you can read the description of what the card will do, and it'll tell you exactly how to play the card. So for example, in this one, you will roll 5 die, and for every 1 through 6 rolled, you will reveal 1 enemy unit anywhere on the map. Additionally, you may see units that have attachments, such as this amphibious reconnaissance platoon has an attachment of an ISR drone. Read the description inside of the attachments and it will tell you what it is that attachment does. Depending on whether or not you're attending the active duty component class or the reserve component class, you may or may not be actually doing the deploying of the units yourself in order for us to meet the timelines. When starting the game, the scenario will dictate who has the initiative and therefore who goes first. In this example, we will give China the initiative and they will start first. Now the decision for the Chinese is which task force will start first, whether it's their ground task force or their naval task force. For this example, we will say that the naval task force is going to go first. The naval task force now has the ability to conduct any of the moves that it can do. The options for these ships would be to move and attack, or move and stay concealed because they're already concealed. Each of the ships can only move as far as the movement points allow. So for example, this ship has a movement point of 5. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. This one is 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And this one is 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So that would be a very simple move for the Naval Task Force. They used all 3 of their moves, and they just moved and stayed concealed. Because there is nothing on the map at this point in which they can target, unless they're able to reveal the adversary, in which case they could then have attacked. Now it's the Americans' turn, and so they would designate whether they want to start with their ground task force or with their naval task force. And with each new turn, you do not have to go in the same order of task forces as was done in the previous turn. So if I start with my naval task force on this turn and do my ground task force second, when it comes time for turn 2, I can start with my ground task force if I wanted to, and then do my naval task force second if I'd like. So in this example, we will have the American Naval Task Force go. The first thing that they will do is move. And all of my carriers can move up to 7 hexes, but you don't always have to take all 7. So let's say I want to move this one, 1, 2, 3, 4, stop. And then in order to target something, I would have to first reveal it. So one way in which I can do that is to play one of my JCC cards. So the one that we originally showed was this one. So I could use one of my moves as a task force to play a JCC that is available to my team. This one being the open source intel. I will roll 5 dice, and for every 1 through 6 rolled, I will reveal 1 enemy unit anywhere on the map. So for every 1 through 6, I have 1, 2, 3 successful dice rolls. These 2 are both above 6, so therefore they are not successful. So now, as an American task force, I can choose which 3 units I want to reveal. So I will reveal this ship, that ground unit, and we'll do this ship. So that was a successful move for me as a naval task force, because now I can choose with my last move of my turn to possibly combat using one of my other 2 ships, which I have not used yet. I cannot use this one because I already moved it on move 1 of my turn. So for my third move, I will move 2, and then I will reveal myself in order to be able to conduct an attack against one of the other revealed enemy units. In this case, I'm going to say that DDG 56 is going to attack T55 103 DDG. So as an American friendly force, I will need to denote how many missiles I'm going to fire. So from DDG 56, I'm going to choose that I'm going to fire 3 missiles. So I would take my long range fire and I'd move it down a quantity of 3. So I went from 10 to now 7. Again, in order to be successful, I have to hit with a 14 on the die roll or less. And as you see, the supernumerary on this one is an infinity symbol because the range in which this missile can actually fire is larger than what is denoted on this map. Now, before the American force can attack the ship, the adversary gets to choose whether or not it wants to defend itself. So looking at what DDG 103 has, it can choose whether or not it wants to defend itself with its interception capabilities, denoted by the purple. So because the American forces are firing 3, the Chinese forces decide that they are going to defend themselves with 4. So we would move down a quantity of 4. You've gone from 9 interception missiles to 5. Now, in order to be successful for an interception with DDG, you would look at the purple, and it is successful on a 14 or less, which is the same probability as the attacker, and it has a range of up to 10 hexes away in which it can defend. It can always defend itself, but the reason that the ranges exist is because there is an ability to mutually defend somebody else. So if there was another ship within 10 hexes, it could defend it, possibly. Now that quantities have been determined of how many are being used to attack and how many are being used to defend, the attacker will roll their dice. So I'm looking for a 14 or less to be successful. And I have a 10, an 18, and a 17. So only one of those is going to be a successful hit, possibly. Now it is up to the defender to roll their dice to see if they are able to counter any of those. And they roll a 2, an 11, a 3, and an 8. So all 4 of those would be successful. Therefore, it's definitely going to take out the 1 missile that would have gone through for me, and they will be safe. Because that was the third move of my task force's turn, That task force is now done. Because I attacked, I can no longer conceal, and that unit will stay revealed at least until my next turn, in which I could choose to conceal it again if I don't attack. So all units on the map stay revealed until it is that unit's turn, and they can choose to conceal instead of attack. So now I would turn back to the Chinese side, and their next task force would be the ground task force. So this ground task force could choose to move. They have a movement point of 1, and they're going to stay revealed. This one can choose to move and conceal. And this one can choose to move if he would like to as well. So he's going to move the maximum for his unit, which is 2. Now, as we showed earlier, some units may have attachments. This unit, when you look at its card, has an attachment of an ISR drone, and that is denoted by either an ISR marker or just a red cube. Because that's all 3 of the moves that I can do with this task force, usually the turn would be done. But if you have an ISR cube, you can always move that, and it does not count against your 3 moves for a unit. Usually I would move the cube or the ISR drone at the beginning of the turn to possibly expose an enemy unit, but because I was so far away, I chose to wait till the end. Now, if you read the JCC, this one says that every turn I can move this 3 hexes away from me, and it has an ultimate range of 7 hexes from that host unit. So if I move my 3, 1, 2, 3 in any direction, whatever I fly over is automatically exposed. So now I can target that in future turns. So now we would go back to the last task force that has to move, which is the American Ground Task Force. So with the first move, I could choose to take my logistics unit and move it to a different hex outside of the ISR and conceal it again. For the second move, I will move this unit 2 hexes, which puts me adjacent to this hex. Now for a land hex, if you are adjacent by 1 hex, everything that is there is revealed on both sides, just due to proximity. So I would flip over my units as well as their units. This allows me to attack. So in this movement, if I wanted to move, that would reveal their units, and then I can choose to attack. So for this one, I have an infantry unit as well as a HIMARS unit, and I can see that the enemy has a logistics unit and a mill deck. For this example, I will choose to attack with the HIMARS unit against their logistics unit. With my HIMARS section, I need to choose how many I'm attacking with and what kind of quantity of ammunition. So over here you'll see the long range fires denoted by the red cube, which would be that quantity of 10 and a range of 4. Over here you'll see another type of munitions, which is denoted by an orange cube. If there is 2 different long range strike values, the orange cube will denote whatever is the second or the higher value one. So I can see I have one that is successful on a 12 with a range of 9. That's denoted by the orange cube. Now because this is such a close attack and it's only adjacent by 1 hex, I'm going to choose to use my weaker ammunition that has a lower range. So I'm going to say that I'm going to attack with 4. So I would move my quantity from 6 down to 2. Now the adversary that I'm looking to attack has a choice. Can they defend? They do not have any defense anti-rocket capabilities, so they're left essentially at the mercy of the dice roll. If another unit was close enough to them and had some way of defending them, they could at that time reveal themselves and defend their friendly unit. So now I would come over to do the dice roll, and again I chose that I was going to fire 4 ammunition. So 4 rockets means 4 dice. I hit on a 10 or less, and I have a 9, a 2, 6, and a 17. So 3 of those dice are successful hits. Now I would move over to where the unit is, which is right here. And you can see it, not only is there the unit there, but again, there was the mill deck. So no matter what, if there's a mill deck with a unit, the mill deck will take the first successful hit. So the first successful rocket would have hit the mill deck and killed that. Because I had 2 more successful hits, I would look at how many health points that unit has. This unit only started with 1 health point. So because of that, the first rocket, or the second rocket, would have killed it, and the third rocket would have never even been needed. So this unit would now be dead. And we would take it off the map. Because every task force has now done their set amount of moves, this would end turn 1. Because China did 3 moves, America did 3 moves, moving their naval task force, playing a JCC card to reveal the Chinese, and then firing on them with their unit. The Chinese task force moved all 3 units, stayed concealed, moved their drone, and then the American task force concealed one of their units that was exposed by the drone after moving it, moved another unit, and then with their third turn, they moved up, revealed the units by proximity, and then attacked and defeated one of the Chinese units. At the end of a turn, you will decide which team has initiative. Now, initiative is based on who defeated the most or had the most successful turn. Because none of the American forces were killed during that turn, but a Chinese force was killed, America would have the initiative because they killed more of the Chinese forces during that turn than the Chinese did. Starting turn 2, now that America has the initiative, America would get to choose whether they start first or whether the Chinese start first. So in this example, America would choose to start first, and they can choose whether they start with their ground task force or whether they start with their naval task force. For turn 2, I'm going to show a couple more different types of examples. First, I'm going to show how to conduct an attack with the infantry, utilizing this infantry unit against another infantry unit. I'm going to show how to mutually defend, and then I'm going to show how to do a logistical resupply. So on turn 2, if the American forces wanted to start with their ground task force, my first move could be to detach my infantry unit and move them up to 3 hexes, but I will just move 1, 2 to get inside of this hex, reveal this enemy unit, and then I'm going to conduct combat with them. So I first go to my unit and I determine how I want to attack. I choose that I want to use my small arms capabilities, and I want to attack with 3. Now there is an attachment card on this infantry unit. Now the anti-tank missile, what it does is it allows me to permanently increase the unit's ground assault value by 6. So when I'm using my small arms capabilities, typically I'd be successful on a 6 or less dice roll. But because I can increase it using my JCC by 6 points, I'll be successful on a 12 or less. Now, when conducting small arms attacks or infantry fighting, the defender gets to choose whether or not they want to defend as well. So we'll say that they defend with 3 as well, but in this case, to be successful, they have to roll a 5 or less on their die. So I'm going to roll my 3, and I'm looking for a 12 or less. And we got a 9, a 6, and a 16. So 2 of those are going to be successful. And remember, they hit on a 5 or less. So a 15, a 13, and a 14. So none of these are successful in defending against the American attack. So because the Americans were successful at 2, there was only 2 hit points that were available. This unit would now be dead, and any of its attachments, in this example, the ISR drone that was used earlier in the game, is now dead along with that unit. Now for the second move of this ground task force's turn, I'm going to show you how to do a logistical resupply. So this unit is my logistics unit, and I can choose to move it to get to within a closer proximity if I need to, or I can simply resupply as long as I'm within range, which in this case I am within range where I'm at right now. So I would simply flip over, and I would choose how I want to resupply. Because American logistics are a little bit more robust than the Chinese adversary, there's multiple ways I can actually do a logistical resupply. So as you can see, there's two different quantities listed right here. The 2 with the 6 supernumerary and the 6 with the 3 supernumerary. What that means is that I can choose to resupply up to 2 pieces of equipment up to 6 hexes away, or I can choose to resupply 6 units of equipment, so 6 missiles, up to 3 hexes away. So both of these units would be within that, where I could give them up to 6 missiles. But for this example, let's just say that I want to resupply that infantry unit that was a little bit more north. They are 1, 2, 3 hexes away, meaning that I can use that higher value, and I can resupply them with up to 6 units of equipment. So I would come over to my logistics company, and I would choose how much of that equipment I want to give them. So if I want to restock their small arms supply that they just expended, move down the quantity on my logistics company, let's say by 5. So I'd go from 20 down to 15, and then I would go over here and I would move my quantity up by 5. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And that would be move number 2 for my ground forces. Now I don't necessarily have to make a third move if I don't want to. I can always forfeit my third move, or I can play a JCC again if it's available. So for example, I played this JCC in my first turn, so after that I would have flipped it over and it would have been out of commission for the rest of that turn. But when we start turn 2, some of these JCCs come back in if they have an infinity sign. So we would move back to it being the Chinese turn, and they would decide whether they want to move with their ground task force, which is really only 1 unit left, or if they want to move with their naval task force. So in this example, we'll move with the naval task force. We'll say turn 1, they choose to move 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then conceal, because this unit was revealed using a cyber attack on the first turn by the American forces. This one wants to move 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then stay concealed. And then let's say that this one wants to move 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and it wants to enact some revenge, and it wants to attack the American vessel. So this unit was attacking with a quantity of 4 against the American vessel, which was going to mutually defend with 2 of its own rockets, and another American vessel revealed itself to do some mutual defense with 4 of its rockets. So the Chinese DDG is deciding to attack with a quantity of 4, and now it's the Americans' turn to decide how many they want to defend with. So in this example, we'll say that DDG 56 wants to defend with 2 of its own missiles, so it'd go down a quantity of 2, but if you have another unit which is within range, you can mutually defend. And so we're going to use that unit up there, which is going to be within range of a strike coming from there over to there. Just by simple math, we can see that they would be able to intercept. And that unit is going to mutually defend using some of its capabilities. Now, in order to mutually defend, this unit would have to reveal itself, and then it can defend. And the rules that we typically use inside of the Academy is a common sense defense system, which is basically if you are within the range of the incoming attack, you can defend. So how we would usually see that is count the distance between hexes of the attack, and then the distance between the defender and its interception. If that is a logical distance, then it will work. So let's just say that this is a distance of 12 hexes, and this is a distance of 1, 2, 3, 4 to interception. As long as it's less, then that is going to be successful at intercepting. So now that this unit has revealed itself to do some mutual defense, it chooses to move down its quantity by 4 to mutually defend. So now there's going to be a total defense of 6, the 2 from the original unit and the 2 from the unit that's mutually defending. So the attacker would go first, hoping for a 14 or less, and they have 1, 2, 3 successful dice rolls. And the defender would roll a quantity of 6 die because they're using 4 from the mutually defending ship and 2 from the original ship. And they are defending with a 14 or less as well. So they'd have 1, 2, 3 successful dice rolls. So 3 and 3, that would basically just wipe out that attack. Nobody would lose anything. So ultimately, mission objectives for the game are going to be determined based on the scenario, whether it's moving a force to a certain point on the map and then persisting, or whether it's winning through attrition or meeting some type of objective. And that will be set by the academy and by the school that you're participating in. Ultimately, this game is completely malleable. There is a ton of different units that you can use, a lot of different capabilities, hundreds of different JCC cards and event cards to really get into the weeds. But this is a very simplistic way for students and Marines to be able to play through and understand how the joint force would fight in a high-end fight against an adversary in a place like the Indo-Pacific, utilizing these littoral type operations.